Would you like to share something, slides or something? No, or just.
No, I don't have any slides. I've just got notes to talk this time.
Yes, I just want to make some changes in the settings. That's why I asked you.
Right, okay.
Good.
I've got my notes here, which I'll probably refer to.
Yes,
but I haven't got anything at the moment. I will be doing PowerPoints in the future, but at the moment, this is just a
yes, it's fine. Yes.
Introduction.
Great. This chapter is really, really great. It's full of interesting information.
Yes, at the moment I've got a label across your head which says this meeting's being recorded.
Yes.
Can I get rid of that? Because I can't see your face.
Okay.
Oh, it says continue. Wait a minute. Press continue. Right, that's done it.
Okay, good. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to another online session. So tonight, so the topic is really interesting, and it's full of many subjects related to education, related to the brain, related to how we learn, and many interesting information. I am very excited to welcome Dr. Jennifer with me tonight. So hi, Jennifer.
Hi, very pleased to meet you properly, Aziz. We've been chatting on Twitter for a while, and I'm very grateful to be interviewed. It's the first one I've had since I completed my book, and gives me a chance to explain a little bit about it.
Yes, so before we dive into more details, let me remind you that the main objective of Everyone Academy is to connect teachers together to increase online collaboration, especially in these difficult times. Yes. So I also would like to mention that I was very lucky to receive or maybe to be one of the first readers of the first chapter of Dr. Jennifer about brain plasticity and education. Yeah. It is really a great chapter full of wonderful information about the brain, about the learning process, and about. So I will let Jennifer introduce herself and her background if she wants, and then we can ask her some questions.
Yes, lovely. That sounds great to me, Aziz. Thank you. Well, I'm a very curious teacher who wanted to investigate feelings and emotions in learning, which I did in my first book for my PhD. And this new book has kind of been a natural follow-on from that, which took me into brain plasticity. And I looked lots of stuff up about that and connected it with teachers' practice by looking at their blogs and books, and also psychologists' blogs and books on Twitter and LinkedIn, and collecting data and making connections. And the sort of research I do, it's a mixed method, qualitative research, and I'm a phenomenological researcher, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it basically means that you pursue a focus of research in an area you're interested in, a question, and you see what connections you can make that are relevant to that focus. So I wanted to see if this would take me anywhere towards understanding teaching and learning in a better way. And I think it has. It's with phenomenological research, you don't actually, although you have a focus and a question, you don't have a vision of how you're going to complete your work that you find out on the journey. So I find it very interesting. And I've met a lot of very interesting people and collected data from working teachers and parents and learners. And I've included that information in my book.
Yes. Okay, maybe the first, when we write about a certain topic, we are driven by something, by a motivation, by a passion, something that interests us. What was your motivation behind writing this book about this very, I can say it's very complex and at the same time interesting topic, because it is about the brain and about the connections, about the neurons, etc. So it's a little, so there is a little bit of scientific, knowledge there, right?
Most of the scientific knowledge I have learned in the process of researching. I'm not naturally a scientist as such, but I found my investigations very interesting and relevant to a teaching approach, and so to my teacher's point of view, I think there's a great deal to be learned from the subject, and I'm hoping to generate other teachers and students' interest in exploring the possibilities of the subject. But my own passion comes from, I was a special needs teacher, and I became passionate about trying to see the learner's point of view. And I think that what I have discovered with my research hopefully will help everybody, including learning teachers, because we are learning as we teach, very many of us. So that's what drives me, the feeling that we could all do better, quite honestly, including myself. I think that I've improved my knowledge about teaching by doing this research, and I just hope it will be useful to people. That is my main motivation, is to find out how this topic can be useful, because feelings and emotions in learning have tended to be ignored by traditional science. And I think that in many ways we have sort of adopted that opinion about ourselves, that we can only take a traditional view of learning. But there are inspirational teachers who have they are intuitive and have a natural flair for teaching. And I hope that my research will help them to justify their work, whatever it is, in the different areas that they're working in. So that's another motivation. I have quite a lot of motivations, actually.
Yes. Okay, I just want to remind people that we are going to have a series of online sessions with Dr. Jennifer. So this is just the first one.
I foolishly promised.
Yes. So why you think you mentioned in your book, and I quote or in the first chapter, why you think we tend to dismiss them? I'm talking about feelings and emotions, although we are driven by them. So we are driven by them and we tend to dismiss them. It's kind of, it's like a paradox or something.
Yes, it is, isn't it? I don't know, there's a sort of disjointed thing where I suppose we think we might be upset by them. So we sort of think, well, we don't want to think about that. But actually, they are part of our thinking process, and a very important one. Sometimes they work well, sometimes they don't, but we do need to think about them, I think. And I've discovered quite a lot about it. So, yeah.
Yes. So, do you think we are rational sometimes or most of the time? Meaning that we base our judgment or what you call decision making upon our brains or on emotions, or maybe both.
I think that sometimes it works for us and sometimes it doesn't. But I think that we're using them all the time, because I think the basic logic behind them is just making connections. So we connect with our experience and we make judgments on that. And we don't often think about enough. We haven't learned enough about how we work as thinking animals. So, but there is a lot of information out there, and I have enjoyed collating across different areas, different sections of data on different subjects. And each of my chapters covers a different subject. So in my second chapter, I'm dealing with a theory about emotion. And I went to a neuroscientist, hes𝗲𝘂𝗀𝘀𝗿𝘀𝗁, who is in America, and she's been working for 25 years looking at feelings and emotions, and she's come up with a theory about emotion, which I found very good. I found it quite difficult to understand it at first, but my second chapter explores all that and explains that she has actually validated, and so have lots of other neuroscientists, that although we tend to deny the importance of them, they are operating all the time and making our brains make connections. So it's very important for us to be aware of that, I think. It needs bringing to the forefront so that we can consider this when we're working with students.
Yes, so if we want to make, in simple terms, if we want to make or to write a definition about brain plasticity, I know it's a very complicated maybe term, but if we want to make it very simple to people.
Right, well, simply, we have 100 billion neurons, which is very hard to get your head around. So at one neuron, so that's the neuron part. Plasticity is a great long list of sort of thesaurus terms, we could say, where it means to assess, to be malleable, to surmise, to sorry, my brain's gone. But you have a great long list of meanings for plasticity, which goes into engineering and all sorts of other terms. So our brains it's how our neurons connect, basically. It's about our neural nets connecting. And my first chapter describes the history of that, which is the one that you've read, with some stories about different people, different neuroscientists, and their experiences of working with patients. And it sort of explains a bit about how our brains work. And that's the sort of basis of the first chapter. The second one goes on to do theory about emotions and feelings specifically. But I think that's my simplest explanation of what the word neuroplasticity means. It means that our neurons join together with electrical paths and neural nets, which are flexible and changeable, and they can even be random. And some of them become embedded, and others sort of become dormant or wither away. And that's how our brain works, basically, fundamentally.
So if we know more about our brain, and I know that you mentioned that you said brain brain science, we are still at the very early stages of
Yes.
learning about the brain.
Yes.
So if we know more about the brain and how it is working, how do neurons function, the synapses, etc., and connect this to learning, maybe we can improve our educational system and improve our educational approaches, right?
We can also explain something of how we justify our work, because what we are doing very often, you know, good teachers are intuitive and they are also very practical in how they work with groups of students very often, but they often aren't able to justify their work sufficiently to management. And I think that this area, if everybody applied some aspect of it to their own work, it helps to justify what we're doing, because we are not we are professional teachers who make judgments actually as we are teaching. We pick up on responses from students intelligently, and we note what they are taking in. And when they're not taking something in, we can adjust our lessons on the spot quite often. We don't just give sort of training schedules. We have other skills as well. We can do that, and that is part of it, to follow a syllabus. But very often our management think that that is all that's involved, as if we are just delivering a program. But and we are, of course, but we have extra skills. We have professional skills of judgment, which aren't always appreciated. And I think that if we look at why we are doing that, why we're intuiting our response to students, very often some understanding of brain plasticity gives you, you can explain why you're doing what you're doing. Very often you have to do it in retrospect, because you look back and you see what responses you had from the students. And if you are recording that, maybe you're videoing it, or whatever, you can look at those videos afterwards and go, aha, you know, this student was responding that way. I will pick up on that student's question in the next lesson. And you will vary your syllabus professionally, and you'll be responding to where your students are at that moment. You will understand the process better of what you are doing, I think.
Yes, there is something also that caught my attention. You said that we find new solutions, but sometimes convinced ourselves mistaken ideas were correct.
Yes.
So it's like the brain is
Yes.
fooling us or leading us astray.
Yes.
So that's why we don't know much about the brain, because it's fooling us.
Yes, it's a kind of, I think I was just looking through and trying to pick out relevant things out of my notes. And I was, because you can never find what you want at the moment, can you? It's a sort of multi-generator. It's a biological generator that's sort of working all the time. So we can control it up to a point, but we can't completely control it, because it's working anyway. Yes. It works while we're asleep. It works while we're awake, making simple connections. This is what I mean by logic. It may not be telling us the truth, as you very wisely point out. It may not be telling us the truth. And we can be deceived by thinking that we've made an important connection and it must be true. Unfortunately, we see that on the internet and in politics currently. And if we are aware that we can make mistakes and we're not afraid to admit it, we can correct them, and we can look at other people's perspectives. We can think a bit more carefully, because I think that the internet's encouraging us to do binary thinking. It's encouraging us to come to quick answers. We think we can just go to the internet and say, right, that's the answer. And we're not always being wise about the information that we're gaining.
Yes, yes. This is really funny in a way, because the brain is fooling us, and sometimes we use this for our positive side. For example, I'm going to talk a little bit about the placebo effect. For example, sometimes we you know that the mind has a powerful influence on the body.
Yes.
So we take a certain medication and we feel better. The medication is fake.
Yes.
So in this way, the brain is fooling us, but in a positive way.
Yes, and in many different ways, and it's very individual to each person. Every person is unique, because, and that is why when we are talking about the normal response of children, although some of that will be true to ages and things, we aren't taking enough account of our uniqueness and the potential that we all have. We all have tremendous potential. And understanding about how our brains work a little. I mean, we don't have to be wonderful scientists, but enough information has been given to us for us to be able to understand this now. We have enough information to draw more sensible conclusions and to kind of make allowances for the way we are. Make more allowances for ourselves. Sometimes we're too hard on ourselves, but also we think that we know what is right when we haven't waited to reflect about things or listen to anybody else's perspectives.
Yes, I want to focus more on the brain and learning. So do you think it's high time to apply some sort of brain-based learning, which actually refers to teaching methods and lesson designs and school programs based on the latest research about the brain?
I'm not sure about that. I think it would have to be translated through professional teachers' own opinions about it in their own subject and area, because I think you could produce a very simplistic program. You know, I'm being a bit cheeky now, but you could be coloring pictures of the brain in with infant children, and you wouldn't actually be doing anything constructive. But if you get a group of infant teachers who are very often extremely clever about how, because they deal with the young brain when it first starts to be educated, and they're often very knowledgeable about how to inculcate the skills needed for complicated thinking. You know, they understand it better than that, but actually explaining to children may not be a good thing. It would have to be done professionally with collaborative research in the classroom to see what was appropriate, I think. You could come up, very often people come up with a bright idea and it becomes commercialized on the internet to, you know, if you just do 6 bullet points, or if you follow this program, this will be great. But actually it's more complicated than that. We're talking about really quite deep human thinking processes. And I think we all need to apply it to our own area and discipline and the teaching that we're doing at the moment. You know, it needs to be going forward a sort of dynamic process where we're just a bit more aware. I think students at college, yes, definitely should be taught about it, and teacher training colleges. And then I think that it's down to individuals to collaborate with each other and develop a better way forward for education, quite honestly. Because I think that this is offering us a fresh look, a fresh perspective on what we teach.
you also mentioned some very interesting stories in the first chapter.
Yeah.
I know that the rest of the chapters contain some stories about people and how you relate these stories to issues related to the brain.
Right.
So do you think this human connection or the humanistic side is important even in science?
Yes, I do. I think it's across the board important. The more you do research into the subject, the more you realize that it's the key cases in neuroscience where people were exceptional and not ordinary and normal and typical that highlight the wonderful potential of the brain. So, yeah, I think in all aspects of social science, it is relevant to work more on an individual level. You can still do quantitative research, yes, by all means, but I always say that quantitative research requires somebody to make a decision about the results. And especially in social science, somebody has to make a qualitative decision about what the quantitative result means. So you get that with exam results. Somebody looks at the exam results and judges from that, what can you get from that? What, from going down to what the children are actually learning and how it was taught. And we should be much more meaningful in looking at how things are taught and be more thoughtful about what we conclude about grades, particularly in exams. I think we've gone down, in some cases, we've become too swayed towards looking at graphs and figures of numbers which represent real children but are not particularly helpful to those children.
So here you are talking about assessment.
Yes.
Okay, yes. So I love this phrase. I know it's common. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Yes.
So do you think we can use this scientific facts in teaching and learning foreign languages with maybe in sort of practice or something?
Yes, because it turns out that our social contact is very important to how our brains work. They operate a lot better when we have social connections. So, conversational language is very important to making our brains work properly. We need that because we're very social animals, and we've started a bit with the internet and with some approaches to language to think that we can teach it automatically. But actually, we need to actually mix with people that speak that language properly. You can't just do it, it's useful to have the translator apps on social media that we can just press on. I mean, I'm monolinguistic, unfortunately. I wish I could speak other languages. I have very little bit of French, but I experienced that myself. I always relate to my own experience and other people's experiences. They tell me about stories, basically. We're story-based learners as well as social animals in many ways. So I failed my French GCSE back in the day, a long time ago. It's called O-levels in England in those days. But anyway, basic 16-year-old exam. But when I went to France and spent the summer there, I came straight back and passed it. And that was because I'd actually heard it spoken in the country and experienced it live. And that somehow made a connection for me. I straight away took the exam and passed it. All the grammar lessons I'd had hadn't worked. until I was actually exposed to the real language, and somehow it all slotted into place for me. And I just passed the exam when I came back at the end of the summer holiday. So I think it's very important.
Yes. So neurons that fire together, wire together, is also, you called it long-term potentiation, which involves persistent strengthening of synapses, etc.
Yes, that's
so.
Yeah. So repetition, and I think that all the old-fashioned methods are useful, but you need the perception of the teacher in applying them to a particular class, because each class and each student are different. You know, there may be some similarities across age groups, etc., but in actual fact, it's your professional judgment dealing with that class. You know whether they are, you can judge their concentration span as you lecture them. You can, you know, all that comes into it. I think that we have a very important job as teachers, and sometimes we're a bit too humble about what we do, and we put up with people telling us how to do things. But I think we need to develop our teaching, and brain plasticity backs us up on an awful lot of our good practice.
Yes, and this is also good for the brain, because it is physically changing when it learns new things.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So, I mean, I'm an example. I'm in my 70s and I'm carrying on with this interest, and I've learned a huge amount over the last 3 years. Although I had worked with students originally for my PhD, I've changed enormously since I started to do my research at the age of 50. I've learned a huge amount and gradually put it into some sort of perspective in order to be able to come up with this book. And I think we all have a huge amount of potential, actually. Everybody has potential. Whatever level they are at, they can improve if they have the right sort of teaching and encouragement.
Yes, and you also alluded to this in your book when you mentioned the story about the Japanese woman who was able to, create this app.
Yes, she gave a speech to Apple.
Yes.
Yes, in an international conference, and she was in her 80s, and she said that Apple ought to realize that older people are capable of doing much better. So when you think that a lot of people in old people's homes are not stimulated enough because their workers don't realize that they maybe need more stimulation, you know, and to think about different things. Obviously, it depends where they're at, but it seems to me that whatever level you're at, you can do better. You can be the best you can be with whatever you've inherited your ability. And a bit later on in my book, you've only read the first chapter, I think it's the 4th chapter, I compare the Finnish and the British education system. And the Finnish system has that as its sort of principle throughout, that they are trying to help all the learners in the country to be the best they can be for themselves, which I think is a very good value. So all of this that I've been studying brings up human principles and values. We need to think more about that. What is it we're hoping for our world, and how can we improve it? A lot of us are talking about that post-pandemic epidemic. We're talking about how can we improve our education system? How can we solve our problems in the world? And if we apply some of the information which I have collected, which I hope will be useful in different areas, of study, I think that it could be helpful. I obviously don't know in what way. I can see, though, that it has potential for developing academic disciplines in various, across the board, actually, because we need to change our attitude to how we think. We really don't understand ourselves enough. Some people do, but then this gives us a scientific understanding of why we are like we are. So although lots of people are very good in their own area, this subject kind of changes our attitude to who we are and helps us to understand how our minds work better, I think. That's the conclusion I've come to.
So you also mentioned that mental and physical connections are impossible to separate in practice, and both should be taken into account when planning interventions.
Yes.
Can you elaborate more on that, especially in the context of teaching and learning?
I think that we could put students in situations which affect their feelings much more, and we could listen to their responses, not all the time, obviously, but I think we ought to think about that. So you, for instance, playing music, showing, we do show videos, but I think that we could use that more while we break them up into discussion groups where they talk about a video and talk about the human values but after watching a video of something, and actually think that if we're talking about teaching language, you could do that and you could get them to discuss in that language some issue from that country. And I think that you would be giving them a much more complete experience. You could think about how to do that. Obviously, you invite in people who speak that language sometimes, or you show videos of that. But I think you think about how to create a complete environment that affects their feelings and emotions. So, and you could do that. We've got so much new technology can enhance that, but it requires us to perceive how that might work with our knowledge of our students and the situation and the language and the syllabus we have. We need to use more imagination, I think, because, and I think that discussion amongst students is very valuable because that's social contact. I'm not saying you shouldn't have formal lessons where they listen to a lecture. That's important as well, I think. And repetition is important. So but we have a whole panoply of different methods, and it's up to the professional teacher to work out, to research with different classes and find out what works. I think that's possible.
Yes. So there is also the idea that you mentioned in the chapter that brain plasticity is an essential electrochemical life force.
Yes.
Affecting and enabling. So it is affecting and enabling all aspects of all our lives.
Yes.
So why you attached so much importance to this to brain plasticity? It is affecting all our lives in all aspects.
I think I kind of explained that when I said that I think that it's relevant to every area of our lives. If we are in education and we're teaching, we need to understand more about it so that we can relate it to our learners and to our own professional development process, so that we can understand. You were saying at the beginning, we're very often fooled into thinking that we know the truth about everything or a particular thing. We think something makes sense to us and therefore it must be true. But if we reflect afterwards about the subject and if we talk to other people, we can use their perspective and their experience, their life experience, and learn something. And very often we can develop further forward by learning about other people's perspectives. And if we put our brains together, we are all analysing our different experiences and knowledge. And if we put them together and listen to each other, I think we can go forward with more success and more positively. I think that that works because we're all learning from each other and we're collaborating.
So learning is a lifelong process, as they say.
Yes, and researching as well. I think that teachers they are researching anyway. When they walk into a classroom and are faced with a class, they are assessing that class, and sometimes they adapt their syllabus just from what they can see, you know, and they will split the class up into different groups at work. They think they'll try them working together in different ways. And that is researching, but very often teachers are not aware that they could video that process and maybe learn more about it, looking back at it, reflecting and talking to colleagues and learning from other teachers who are doing a similar thing. So I believe very much in collaborative research.
Yes, that's my next question about collaborative research. Do you think that maybe, I know that teachers play all the roles in the world. They are psychologists.
Yes.
They are doctors. They are they play all the jobs in the world. Do you think psychologists and you know the people who are specialized in brain research should collaborate to you know, maybe to devise more appropriate approaches, teaching and learning approaches, because the past educational approaches are no longer working in today's classroom, right?
That's right. I think you're right. But I think that possibly that's one reason why they haven't worked, because teachers have been told by experts what to do. And I think very often, you know, they're given a program of work or they're advised they should be doing something that a psychologist has recommended. And that isn't actually practical, because in their classroom, they are bombarded with real life. And I think that it's great for psychologists to work with teachers and for scientists to work to inform that work. But I think that teachers need to take responsibility for developing their programs of work themselves, referring to psychology, informed by psychology and science, but not directed by it, because those psychologists and scientists, there are some who are hands-on with learners, and that's fine. But I think that teachers on the ground need to they do work things out for themselves, but I think they could be more informed by psychology and science and actually work things out and share them with each other, best practice. And that very often teachers have continuing professional development, you know, CPD is paid for, and people come in and lecture you. I think that that's fine, but I think that teachers very often can teach each other a great deal by actually talking to each other. The subject specialists can work in learning hubs across schools, and they can inform each other about what has worked. I think we just need to proceed in a better way, really, and not be so humble about waiting for someone to give us a program of work and the answer to everything. I mean, yes, try different programs of work and see. We need those programs to draw on, but it should be the choice of the management in education and the teachers together, what's working, basically, because the world moves on and situations change. And as it's changed with COVID, things have changed, and teachers all over the place have really experimented with using online. And it seems to me, from what I have seen, that many of them are realizing that you do need one-to-one contact, that the students do need people. They need to have that support from a teacher. They actually need that. Remote learning has to be personalized, I think, to work well.
Yes, I just want to go back to this idea of lecturing. You said that today's CPD, there is somebody who is adopting this approach of lecturing. This is not, people feel bored, and so they don't learn for people who lecture. So instead, teachers can learn from each other, as you said.
I think that there are lectures that are terrific, you know, and you can gain from that like reading a book. But I think you need both. You need to be using the lecture you've seen, talking to other teachers and working out how that actually would work in the classroom or with learners yourself, because that's the practice part of it that you need to, which will be very different. I think that some of it is good to be the same, and it's like, you know, you've got a program of work, but it may not be appropriate to your particular group of learners. So you have to be able to adapt, I think. I don't think I'm not negating lecturing people, but it's just that we've kind of forgotten the interactive part of learning that we need to be doing, and the innovation and adaptation that we ought to be doing, using quite often old ideas, but adapting them to our current audience of students, has to be updated all the time, because the world is moving on all the time and our students are changing. And also they all have individual perspectives, so we just have to improve, I think. But also there's more to it than that, because it's about how we regard ourselves. If as teachers we think that we could keep teaching the same lesson every year for the next 20, 30 years, then I'm afraid we're wrong. It's not going to maintain its relevance unless we may be teaching some of the same core knowledge, but we need to learn new things and adapt.
Yes. Okay, that's an exciting discussion, really. We'll move to questions and comments from the audience in a minute. So, but before we do that, I have a little comment. So, do you think that this topic of brain plasticity raises more questions than it answers?
Yes, definitely. I can say that, having concluded my enormous book I've written. I just hope it's got useful stuff in that people can use. That's my aim. I'm not saying that I've found the answer to everything. I haven't. I have just uncovered an interesting new way of looking at education by referring to something that we already know about. You know, I've just connected the data together about brain plasticity and seen its relevance to education, and I'm inviting other people to do the same. So at the end of it, I think the journey's been more exciting than the conclusion in a way for me. I've enjoyed exploring all the different things that I've found and reading experts' opinions. You know, there's some marvelous experts out there in all sorts of different areas of education. And I've just brought together under that umbrella their ideas. But I found it quite an exciting journey. but I can't say that I've reached a final conclusion.
Yes, I know that you have mentioned some experts, especially behaviorists, psychologists.
Yes.
And you know, the behaviorists you have mentioned, maybe Bandora's theory, and something like this.
Yes.
Okay, so I will read the first question or comment from the audience. Okay.
Yes.
How can we cater for mixed ability students' needs in terms of assessment and evaluation, taken into account this idea?
I think that responsive teaching is the answer to that. We need to respond to individual learners, and we need to take more feedback from them, verbal feedback. We need to listen to them more and adjust their work. And you can do that on the spot by just speaking to them. I think that that has far more effect than actually spending hours and hours marking their work. They very often don't read the comments or don't understand them. As we know from texting, you very often misinterpret the written word. And if you have a teacher who is explaining verbally to you on the spot, it's much more effective.
Yes, you know that the idea of the mind can be rewired. The mind can be rewired with repeated and directed attention towards the desired change. What are some procedural steps to rewire our brains?
That's tricky because it depends what you are trying to do. There's a whole range of tasks you might be doing. So it depends specifically what you're trying to rewire. And what I have discovered in my studies is that you can't achieve anything very easily without actually talking to the student about and motivating them to do it. So you can put people through repetitive exercises, but they will be far more effective if they are motivated to do the repetitive exercise, if they understand the point. Understanding the point of being taught something, being motivated to try and do it, like in sport where people practice repetitive stuff in order to increase their skills, like Olympic athletes, you know, they are repeating and repeating and becoming better and better at whatever they're doing. But it really depends on what you're trying to teach. And I do think it's important. You know, I don't think we want to throw any of our methods out of the window. We need to use all of them with more intelligence ourselves.
Yes, there is also a question which is a little bit funny in a way. So you know that there is an unprecedented speed of technology. So there is a development in technology and technological devices, and people are relying on those devices.
Yes.
To do the math, to shop, to write, to do almost everything.
Yes.
So do you think there will come a time when people won't use their brains?
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. I think that we are dumbing our brains down. We're actually dumbing our neural nets down because we think we can just go straight to the internet and get the answer, but it's actually making us vulnerable because we are believing what the internet tells us, because our brain responds to finding a solution immediately and it moves on to something else without reflecting carefully enough about the information it's getting. So I would totally agree with that questioner, actually. I think it is a danger. The internet can offer us enormous value if we use it wisely. But if we don't use it wisely, I think that it encourages us to be lazy and not to think.
Absolutely. Yes, and this is also will lead us to talk about artificial intelligence.
Yes.
We teach machines how to do the work for us. So,
yes, but I've read an article. I read an article recently which said humans must adapt to doing what robots tell them to do, algorithms. We must get better at using them. Well, we're completely giving up our brain there. They're saying, you know, you must adjust to what the machine's telling you. Well, of course, it's training us to binary thinking. If you think of behaviorism, we're being conditioned into binary thinking. Either it's right or it's wrong. And that's a lot of what's wrong with our politics at the moment. There isn't any nuance in between. There's no inferential thinking and surmising very often going on. There is, of course. Of course, there are highly intelligent people who are doing that, but many of us are succumbing to binary thinking, and that's because we're being conditioned into it.
Yes. So what is happening actually in science fiction movies will be a reality. So robots and machines someday will take over and control humans.
It's quite possible. I think if we are stupid enough, it could happen. The thing is, if you can imagine something, it is possible that it can be created. And so some of the films are in a way a warning to us, aren't they, of what, you know, could happen. I don't want to be depressing, but
this is a reality. So because what we think about, so we become what we think.
Possibly. It depends if we want to. We have in the past, if we look back at our history, we've often become what we thought we were. So that lots of people, for instance, who believed in Freudian psychoanalysis actually believed that they had the conditions that they were told they had. Sometimes possibly they may have, but actually the brain is cleverer than that. But they were not aware of that, so they thought that they were fixed like that. You know, they were diagnosed with a particular condition, mental condition, and they accepted that that was what they had. But perhaps they could break away from that if they were encouraged. We don't know. Maybe not. But the assumption that you are stuck as you are is something that makes it a foregone conclusion in a way. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? Yes. And our brains work like that. So if we think we can't do something, we won't be able to do it.
Yes. So that was really exciting. So there is a quick question here. Brain plasticity helps promote the ability to enhance existing cognitive capabilities. In what way?
Yes, I think that's right. Well, you can make new connections throughout your whole life, as we were talking about the 80-year-old app developer. But the main thing is where the feelings and emotions come in, you have to be interested. That's actually, our feelings and emotions are part of our mechanism for intelligence in the brain, which has largely been ignored by psychologists. They decided that they could not record the data, this sort of data. It was too fuzzy, and basically you can. This is what I have discovered in my research. You can record, as long as it's person, time and place denoted. You can say, this is what that person said at that point. This was how they felt about something.
Yes.
So you have data. So it's scientific, you know?
Yes. That was really a great discussion, and we learned a lot from this session, really.
Right.
So before we conclude this session, maybe I can ask you some questions about the challenges you faced when you write the book. Are there particular challenges you faced, and if yes, what are they?
I think just collating such a massive data together and trying to connected and find I didn't know what the format of the book would be until about 3/4 of the way through collecting the data. But in actual fact, you end up with something more original because you're not quite sure how it's going to look at the end. So it's been quite an exciting adventure for me.
So when you collected data, you were not able to decide
it made me quite stressed because I wasn't quite sure where I was going with it, and I was trying to make sure that I could connect up across areas intelligently, you know, and even at the very end of writing it, I abandoned the 9th chapter, and it's only 8 chapters because I decided that I'd stopped saying everything by the 8th chapter. I just included stuff from the 9th chapter in the 8th, and it ended up being a cohesive whole, but it wasn't planned like that from the beginning, if you see what I mean. I had to keep rejigging how it would help the reader through and help me through as I understood what I was collecting. So it's been quite an exciting adventure, and I just hope it's useful to other people.
Yes, it is very useful. It's a very interesting topic. I read every word in the chapter that you sent me. Really.
It's reassuring because sometimes I think I might be getting a bit boring in places. But I think it has to be read in small doses because it's quite hard to take in, because what I've researched is complicated in itself. And so I've had to measure myself through it. So I would advise anybody reading it to just read a little bit a day and reflect about how it relates to their own work and life. And then read a bit more and think about it.
Yes. What is the title of the 2nd chapter?
The 2nd chapter is, oh, here we go. I've got it here. Wait a moment. Sorry. This is the theory chapter, which I'm kind of a bit apologetic for in a way, because it is a bit mind-boggling, but then I think you need theory to back it up. So from a teacher's point of view, even though they may not read my theory, they kind of will know that it's backing them up, I hope, you know, that I've gone to all the science and worked it out. So it's called Changing Perceptions About Feelings and Emotions. And it looks at hes𝗲𝘂𝗿𝗀𝘀𝗁's research and a lot of other people and different psychological research, and discusses it's about proprioception and all sorts of, you know, the technical stuff that I've discovered. And you'd have to read it because it's people say to me, tell us about your book, and I go, I can't, you've got to read it. Because it's deep learning, to be honest. It's you know, but hopefully I've tried to do it in an interesting way, but it is quite stretching to one's thinking, and it is to me as well. Sometimes when I'm not in the mood, I find my own writing quite difficult. But then other times I will look at it and think, wow, that's terrific. That really makes sense. So it's just a very difficult subject, I think.
Yes, maybe part of the difficulty because it is difficult because it is related or connected to many areas.
Yes, it is.
To the science of learning, connected to how the brain learns, connected to neurons, psychology.
Education systems. It kind of goes across a lot of social disciplines, sociology, philosophy, quite a range. So yes, so it's been quite mind-boggling for me, if that's any consolation to anybody that's reading it. And all I can say is good luck.
So do you have any final tips about this topic for the audience?
Just have a think about what I've said and have original thoughts about your own life and your students, and sometimes just follow your own instincts. Think about, why do I think that? Because quite often you'll be right. And, you know, just follow your own feeling sometimes, because we're saying feelings. Follow your own intuitions. When you believe in what you're doing, you may find that you're absolutely right when you look at the evidence.
So we follow our intuition, not our brain.
Well, the intuition is part of your brain. Your feelings and emotions are actually active all the time in your brain, even when you're asleep. So they are an important part of your intelligence processes.
I know that you mentioned also the two types of sleep, the two cycles.
Yes.
But that's another interesting topic.
And it comes up again. Another problem with the book was, for me, is that these things recur. So there's another section later on that tells you more deeply about sleep. But the part in the first chapter refers to Matthew Walker's excellent book about sleep. He's right up to date and has been studying sleep for a long time, 20 years, I think. And his book is excellent. So one of the good things, I think, I've got a lot of links in it to modern research, but also I relate to real people as well. You know, sort of, when I say real people, actual stories about the sort of things that impact people's lives. So I try to keep it interesting that way and not just be dry theory.
Yes, great. I will be waiting for the second chapter.
Oh, will you? Oh, right. I'll have to think about that. It's at the publishers at the moment, being in production.
Or just some part of it.
I see. Good. Well, it's nice to have someone enthusiastic to find out more. So thank you for that. That's encouraging.
So we will plan another. Maybe we can still discuss the first chapter, because it is still full of ideas, still full of stories, still full.
Absolutely.
I just focused on very few points, but there are many ideas to discuss.
Well, I think that was why I suggested that I did a lecture on each chapter, because then I could do PowerPoint slides with the references. And I would be very happy to do that.
Yes,
it would help. Yes, sorry.
We can still, if you want, we can still plan another session on the first chapter.
Yes, because there's a lot in every chapter. This is why it's been a pretty mind-boggling experience for me too. And also I am practicing how I present. So I hope to improve, and you're helping me to practice. So I appreciate that. And if it helps anybody else to get some information and go off and do their own research, I look forward to it, you know, because I haven't produced the answer to everything. Hopefully I can kickstart a whole lot of research in this area in different people's disciplines.
So we will plan the second session about some ideas in the first chapter, right?
Yes, perhaps you have to give me a month or something, because I'm still recovering from
writing. Yes, I know.
A bit of time, and I will.
Yes, you will have plenty of time.
Yes, I'm saying that because you're quite persistent, and I'm like, oh. But I'm just completing it, and I can't cope with any more. You know, my brain hurts. There you go.
Yes, I know that.
I know. Thank you.
So thank you so much for this great session.
Good. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. It's very helpful to me. So thank you, Aziz.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed learning from you, and I really can't wait to see your ideas applied in the actual classrooms, and teachers from all over the world apply the ideas.
I hope so. I really hope. Yeah, I'm too old to do it myself, but I would be delighted to mentor anybody who wants to use anything out of my book, and I will respond to people, which I have been. I've got a lot of teachers actually in the book. I've referred to people who are doing blogs on Twitter who are expert in their own area, far more than I am, but I've, engaged with them.
Yes.
And yeah, so I'm up for that. I enjoy it.
So I will reread your first chapter because the first reading was a little quick.
And take your time and think about how it applies. But that's just an introduction. It's the history, but then we go on to looking at education in more detail as it goes on.
Yes. Okay. So thank you one more time.
My last two chapters, yes. I go into economics, democracy, and knowledge, our attitude to knowledge. So it carries on being complicated. But anyway, thank you very much, Aziz.
So thank you so much. I can't wait for the second session. And as I said, I will read the chapter one more time.
Right.
And we can have a second session, but not soon. After.
No, you've got to remember I'm an old lady, so I need a bit of time to reflect, as I've been advising other people. So
age is just a state of mind,
Hopefully, yes. Yes, well, hopefully I'm enjoying what I'm doing anyway, so I'm lucky. Okay, well, I better say goodbye in that case.
So thank you. Sure, yes, so bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for the questions as well. All the people that gave the questions.
You are welcome.
Appreciate it. Okay, bye.
Bye.